I'm back home. Oh, missing Texas and the kids, and I don't know. Bittersweet, right? It's good to be home, get the puppies back, see the other kids and grandkids and all that. But missing Texas, and what a great Thanksgiving and the people we met there. New friends, old friends, family, loved ones. It was awesome. And speaking of friends, occasionally Sue and I get to meet people that recognize, the bald head and whatnot, and they go, "Wow, hey, Watcher Palmer." And we had that in St. George, a couple of places. One was at the Styx concert. I think I might have mentioned that. And they're just such good people. And we ended up being in line with them, and then we ended up sitting right with them. It was really fun. And other places we've gone. So thank you for coming up and saying hi. It means a lot. I've loved your comments in the last few videos, and I do need to apologize a bit. The last few videos and the times I feel like I've been traveling and gone so much, and my mind is just occupied with other things. And I apologize, because you come here, you spend some time, and I so appreciate it. And a lot of reasons why I appreciate it is I get feedback. I love to hear what your comments are. There's times when I know we disagree, and I get that. And this will be one of those videos, and it's fine. But if we can be respectful and whatnot, it's all good. Now, sometimes when we just write things, the emotion is out of there. So I know I can come across as just cold-blooded, because I'll say, yeah, I totally disagree with what you're saying, and I don't want to come across as a jerk, but I get it. And I usually don't take what you're saying as anything other than it's your opinion, and you have a different opinion, and quite often, it'll make me think, right? And so here we go. We're going to talk about the Temple Mount in this video. There were a few that said, yeah, let's talk about that. I've mentioned this before, but there's a few new things and some interesting things here. We're going to start with kind of current things and then go back. We're going to use scriptures, and we're going to use archaeological evidence and other things to talk about this. We're also going to, you really can't talk about the temple without mentioning Latter-day temples and temples built by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which then gets into the New Jerusalem and Jackson County and all that. And most of you know how my thought process on that. But we'll go through some scriptures and see some things here. Crazy times. Another terrorist attack, this time in Jerusalem. A rabbi was killed and many others injured. And I love how it says that whether it's the police force or the IDF or one of them, they neutralized the assailants. They neutralized them. That means they killed them, right? They killed them. They don't mess around. And then they find out where they lived, and they level their homes. It's good. I like that. Now, this attack by Hamas back in early October, and all the things that are going on with that. I've given you my thoughts and feelings on it. I support Israel 100% on retaliation. I'm not a big fan of the United States getting involved. I am excited and encourage individuals to contribute to causes that they feel would help people in Israel. Do it on our own. The war machine and the military industrial complex and those that profit from it, that's bad. It's evil and it's wrong, and it's just very few people that get very wealthy in getting involved in these foreign wars, and it's really become a conspiracy in a sense of conspiring minds and individuals who monetarily benefit from getting involved in these wars. And it's not just one country, it's not just the United States, it's several, but it's certain individuals from those excuse me, countries. I'm drinking my Cardio Miracle, so you'll hear some shaking and you'll hear me drinking and see me drinking. So if that bothers you, just listen and don't watch. Anyway, when oligarchs from Russia, we point our finger and go, oh, those guys are so bad. They're the ones that benefit all that. We have the same thing here in the United States. And it's the defense contractors and all those that secretively participate in that. A lot of them are politicians. How can a politician who makes, you know, a couple of $100,000, which I know is a good income, but it's not gonna, if you're maintaining two residents and you have kids and family, you know, 200,000 doesn't go very far in this day and age. You're not going to get wealthy, is my point. So how do these politicians end up becoming multi-gazillionaires when they, you know, and they stay in there and they stay in there and they stay in there? Well, it's through these networks of investing in, you know, the only reason why we're in Ukraine, well, I shouldn't say the only reason, is because they're so corrupt, the government in Ukraine, that it allows these, it entices, it's a magnet for this type of operation where you businesses and sheltered companies and whatnot can be established in these countries that are corrupt. And then it's basically a laundering where you invest, the government gives money to a business or an organization within a country, and then that's filtered or laundered, and then it comes back to certain individuals that are privy to the whole thing. And so you have oligarchs in Russia that benefit, and then you have the oligarchs of the United States that benefit, and other countries. But getting back, does God use all these things to fulfill his purposes? Absolutely. He uses the wicked to punish the wicked, number one. We have that in the Book of Mormon. But kings and individuals, look at King Nebuchadnezzar, wiped out the Babylonians. We point our finger, get out of Babylon. Well, Babylon, the epitome of Babylon was King Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar. And yet he has a dream, it's interpreted, it has a lot to do with the kingdoms and all these things, and he respects Daniel at times, and he doesn't like Daniel. He's all this. He's the one that leveled the temple of Solomon, leveled it, and we're going to talk about that. Where that temple was, how it was built. We're going to use scriptures and go through that. So this will be a bit lengthy maybe, but we'll go through that. Now, the attack by Hamas back in October was called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It didn't say mosque, but Al-Aqsa flood. But it was referring to the Temple Mount and the mosque on the Temple Mount. Now, the mosque is not the gold dome. That's a shrine. Yeah, the Dome of the Rock is a shrine. But there is a mosque kind of on the southern end of the Temple Mount. And the Palestinians, and particularly the the Muslim population, many of them in what some call the West Bank, I refer to it as Judea and Samaria region of Israel, they claim that as a holy site, and they also claim that as a desecrated site by the Jews, by even going to the Temple Mount. So this attack was all about the Temple Mount. That's what they called it. So we have to look at these things. Now, when you go to many holy sites that are holy for Israel, holy Old Testament sites, many of them will have a Muslim shrine built over it. And that's a veneration in a way. It shows that they wanted to cover that because it was a legit Jewish site. Many examples of this all throughout Israel. I've seen it. I've been there. I've been to many of these sites. Bethel, house of God, Bethel. There's a Muslim shrine over this. This is where Jacob had his dream of the ladder and angels ascending and descending on the ladder. And then all of a sudden there's this Muslim, so any place that the Jewish people thought were and venerated and they knew and they established, and it's biblical and you can read it, you can see that this was the site, and then the archaeological evidence shows that. In Bethel you can see it. They'll build a shrine over it to say, no, this is our sacred place. Well, the Temple Mount is the ultimate in that. So you not only have a mosque, but you have the shrine. Muslims claim that that's the third most holy site. It's not mentioned at all in the Quran, but they mention that's where Muhammad ascended into heaven. And so they built this shrine over the bedrock or the top of Mount Moriah. And we're going to get into Mount Moriah, and we're going to get into all this. So the very, to me, the most current evidence that the Temple Mount is what it is that this horrific, horrendous, disgusting attack by Hamas on the Israel settlements, all in the name of the Temple Mount. It shows you that that's a significant place, right? Okay. Now, there is, both in the Latter-day Saint community and not a lot, but there's a significant amount of people in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint membership who have a belief that the temple, Solomon's temple, and then subsequently the temple, we'll just say Herod's temple or the second temple, was built in the city of David. We're going to talk about why that just is not the case, and we'll kind of go over the different arguments there in this video. The maybe not the most popular individuals were Martin, the guy named by the last name of Martin, and then another gentleman by the name of, I can't remember if he pronounces it Carnucci or Carnuke, who kind of expanded, if you will, on the theory that Martin had on the city of David being where the temples were, the two temples, and then subsequently the third temple that will be built will be there. And their argument ultimately is that it could be built there and it would be no competition with the Temple Mount. Now, the underlining thing, and I've talked about this in the last two videos with Martin and Carnuke, is that they feel that they adhere to the replacement theology that the Jews have been replaced as a covenant people. So anything that they would have Like they should have nothing to do with the land, nothing to do with the building of the new temple, and the promises, the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant no longer goes through them. It goes through Christians. And we talked about Martin Luther, a reformist. So the Catholic Church goes along with that for the most part. And then, although not totally, it's not like every single Catholic goes along with that, but that has been in their history for a long time, okay? Since the Nicene Creed, really. But the Protestant church has it as well. We talked about Martin Luther, who really did not like the Jewish people and felt like they'd been replaced. And we talked about how Hitler really admired the writings and the works of Martin Luther. And so that perpetuated that. And we all know what how Hitler responded to this. So I don't believe that. I don't believe in any of the replacement theology. I want to go before we delve into the actual scriptures in the Old Testament that I would say really solidify that it is Mount Moriah. It's the Temple Mount, and when we talk about Mount Moriah, it's the same ridge line where Golgotha would be, whether you think it's where the Holy Sepulchre is, or whether you think it's the Golgotha that's close to the Garden Tomb. It's all part of the same ridge line. And the Temple Mount itself is part of the same ridge line. And we have Mount Moriah. We have the temple platform that Herod expanded on. You can see and what I'll do is I'll get a couple of videos that I think really, really explain this, YouTube videos, very well. And I'll put those in the comment section, and I'll pin it so that you can go and visually see it through a couple of different videos. Some of them get a little technical, but you'll be able to see the seams where the Temple Mount was expanded by Herod. Herod was a great builder. He had a lot of issues. He was a nut job, but God used him. God used him. And when Christ came, it was Herod's temple, in a sense, that Christ said, "This is my Father's house." And you desecrate it, you thieves, you make it a den of thieves, tips over the tables. He teaches in the temple. You just have to know there's the steps. There are, I'm jumping ahead. Let's do this. We have to talk about temples in a general sense. And then it all will point to the Temple Mount. Now, in my opinion, many of the scriptures that we interpret as Latter-day Saints, we always focus on us and our history and our temples and everything else, which isn't a bad thing. But I always, particularly when it comes to Isaiah and all of the Old Testament prophets, Zechariah is a big one when it talks about the temple. It's referring to the temple in Jerusalem. We always like to liken it to the New Jerusalem, or the temple, that's built in the latter days. Well, the latter days, the first meaning, in my opinion, is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and that temple to be built. The second meaning and the likeness is the New Jerusalem that's in North America. And that's the second meaning. It's not the first meaning. So in other words, Isaiah is seeing Jerusalem, and I'll point out some scriptures there too. Okay, let me start by reading a couple of little sections of dedicatory prayers of two latter-day temples. Two latter-day temples. So the first temple to be built was the Kirtland Temple. Many of the prophecies concerning the New Jerusalem and the blessings of the New Jerusalem were fulfilled in the building and the dedication of the Kirtland Temple. We had priesthood keys, we had heavenly messengers, we had ordinances. We had wonderful things revealed. Now, it wasn't a fullness of the endowment, but there were many, many interesting things. But let me read a couple of verses here that I think are so interesting. So interesting. I'm going to start in verse 60 of section 109. And these words, O Lord, we have spoken before thee concerning the revelations and commandments which thou hast given unto us, who are identified with the Gentiles. So this is key, because we are from a Gentile nation. Even though many of us have the blood of Ephraim or Manasseh or one of the other northern kingdom tribes, we are Gentiles in the sense of it being a Gentile nation. And that verse 60 is very key in pointing that out. Verse 61, again, I'm in section 109, the dedicatory prayer of the Kirtland Temple. Verse 61 now. But thou knowest that thou hast a great love for the children of Jacob, who have been scattered upon the mountains for a long time in a cloudy and dark day. I would encourage to look up all the references in that. Hosea is one of them, which is really good. Okay. 62, verse 62. We therefore ask thee to have mercy upon the children of Jacob, that Jerusalem from this hour may begin to be redeemed. This is the dedicatory prayer of the Kirtland Temple. Now listen to this. And the yoke of bondage may begin to be broken off from the house of David, and the children of Judah may begin to return to the lands which thou didst give to Abraham their father. Now, this is interesting, that you would have the dedication of the Kirtland Temple, the prayer for that dedication, asking from that day, that day, that things begin to happen. Now, the dedicatory prayer was offered 1836, March 27th, 1836. We know in what was it, 1841 or 2, that Orson Hyde went and dedicated the land for the return of the Jews. And you can read that dedicatory prayer. But this is interesting, because here we have these two, this Latter-day Temple in Kirtland referencing the temple that will be referencing a people and a land in Jerusalem. This is key. This is key. And verse 67, I'm going to skip a couple of verses. And may all the scattered remnants of Israel who have been driven to the ends of the earth come to the knowledge of the truth and believe in the Messiah. That is key, because the Jewish people refer to Messiah. So when you read when Christ is referred as Messiah, take note of that. And be redeemed from oppression and rejoice before thee. So that's interesting, that temple asked for a blessing and return to the lands that's promised them. Okay, now I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to tell you which temple. This is a paragraph from a dedicatory prayer of another temple that the Mormons built, that the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints dedicated, or built and dedicated. And then the dedicatory prayer, this is from that prayer of that temple. And I'll tell you which temple it is after I read this. O God of Israel, turn thy face, we pray thee, in loving kindness towards thy stricken people of the house of Judah. O deliver them from those that oppress them. Heal up their wounds, comfort their hearts, strengthen their feet. Give them ministers after thine own heart, who shall lead them as of old in thy way. May the days of their tribulation soon cease, and they be planted by thee in the valleys and plains of their ancient home. Their ancient home is Judea and Samaria. It's all of Israel. It's all the promised land. And may Jerusalem rejoice. I'm quoting again. And Judea, there it is, be glad for the multitude of her sons and daughters, for the sweet voices of children in her streets, and the rich outpouring of thy saving mercies upon them. May Israel no more bow the head or bend the neck to the oppressor. Ooh, that's a good one. But may his feet be made strong on the everlasting hills, nevermore by violence to be banished therefrom, and the praise and the glory shall be thine. This is the dedicatory prayer of the Salt Lake City Temple. Now, just think of those words and apply them to today. And why would we not be praying for Israel and its people and for Judea and Samaria, and always refer to what the world calls the West Bank? That's like calling the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Mormons, or calling the church the Mormon and not mentioning the name of Christ. Saying West Bank is just as bad as that, instead of saying Judea or Samaria, because these are the biblical heartland. That two temples dedicated by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its leadership, two different temples in the latter days, referring to Judah returning to their land. Now, Judah is a catch-all for Israel to return to their lands, okay? Because we know that the 10 tribes were scattered northward, their blood's mixed, it's all, but to return to their land, they could have all kinds of different tribes, but it's Judah, because Judah occupied Jerusalem, or that was the promised land. Judah and Benjamin were in the southern kingdom, and then you had the 10 tribes up above. But Jerusalem is the uniting city and the ancient city, the eternal city, if you will. but the land is Judea and Samaria, and it spreads, right? Okay, so isn't that interesting that those two temples refer to Judah and Jerusalem? Okay, so that's good. That's good. A good place, I think, for this discussion to start. I do want to refer to one other. This is by Elder LeGrand Richards, and I've told this story before. But as a young missionary going to Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, the Canada Halifax mission, back in '76, we went to the mission home for 4 or 5 days. I can't remember now. In Salt Lake, it was right across from I think the Deseret Gym, the mission home. And it had bars on the windows, which was kind of weird. They'd chain up the vending machines, the kind that you'd pull the lever, and because we'd have an all-day fast. I think it was the first time I ever fasted a full 24 hours. About killed me. But what was I talking about? Oh yeah, we had this cool meeting. It was amazing in the temple, in the assembly room. Which, if you get a chance, it's probably too late now. I think it is. When we were in St. George, we went to the open house of the St. George Temple, and you get to go to the assembly room, solemn assembly room. It's so cool. And I've been to the Salt Lake one several times. Amazing. And to think about the things that took place in these pioneer temples, we call them, that had the solemn assembly rooms. But as young missionaries going out, we had a meeting there, and apostles came, and one was LeGrand Richards. And I can honestly say I don't remember a word he said, but I remember how I felt. And I remember looking up at him, and I was actually sitting up fairly close, and I remember him speaking, and it just was like he had a light around him. And I remember just thinking, this is a man of God. And it really had an influence on me to kind of get my act together and take this serious. But this is from a talk that he spoke of in the mountain of the Lord's house. And he's talking about the Salt Lake Temple. And he says this in his talk. I can't remember, it doesn't say when he gave this, but he says this. He says, Isaiah saw the mountain of the Lord's house established in the top of the mountains in the latter days. And he named the latter days when they would say, come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And then he says this, how literally has this been fulfilled in my way of thinking? So this is his opinion. In that very house of God of Jacob, right here on this block, the Salt Lake Temple, this temple, more than any other building of which we have any record, has brought people from every land to learn of his ways and walk in his paths. So let's go to Isaiah chapter 2 and read that, because it is interesting. And this is where I say we have to look at the first meaning of this. And the very first verse gives us it's just plain as day. And then we can look at the Salt Lake Temple as the second meaning. So here it is. Isaiah chapter 2, and this is quoted exactly the same way in the Book of Mormon. So we have the inspired version, if you will, of this verse, of these verses, this chapter. But here it is, the word that Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. So there you have it, guys. It's this. The next verses are concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. But remember verse 1, concerning Judah and Jerusalem. But now we can liken it, and that's why we can call what took place in Salt Lake as the New Jerusalem, or the center stake of Zion. And for a time, it was Kirtland as the center stake of Zion. And at another time, it was Nauvoo as the center stake of Zion, the New Jerusalem. But Salt Lake is where it is. And the waiting for Jackson County to be it just doesn't make sense. And we'll get back to this in just a second. But let's look at it's in section 124. I reference this in a few other videos, but we should really read this. I'm going to start. This is section 124. This was the last time Joseph Smith referred to Jackson County, New Jerusalem being there. Verily, verily, I say unto you, this is verse 49 of section 124, that when I give a commandment to any of the sons of men to do a work unto my name, those sons of men go with all their might and all they have to perform that work, and cease not their diligence, and their enemies come upon them and hinder them from performing that work. Behold, it behooveth me to require that work no more. And it was a commandment to build Jackson County and the temple and the temple complex, and that would be the New Jerusalem. But they had huge opposition in Missouri, and this is what the revelation was. It behooveth me to require that work no more at the hands of those sons of men, but to accept of their offering. So this is fascinating. He doesn't require that anymore to go to Jackson County and do that. I'll do it somewhere else. I'll continue reading. And the iniquity and transgressions of my holy laws and commandments I will visit upon the heads of those who hindered my work, unto the third and fourth generation, so long as they repent not and hate me, saith the Lord God. And if you check out some history, I have a book, it's out of print, and a lot of it they say can't be verified, but it's the persecutors of the fate of the persecutors of the prophet Joseph Smith. It's pretty intense. But those people didn't repent. They chose poorly. Okay, verse 51, section 124. Therefore, for this cause have I accepted the offerings of those whom I commanded to build up the city and a house unto my name in Jackson County, Missouri, and were hindered by their enemies, saith the Lord your God. Guys, it's required at their hand no more. Let's just move past that and realize the blessing that we have of hundreds and hundreds of temples throughout the world, and in particular, right around the center stake of Zion, we have almost 30 temples maybe in Utah and the regions thereabout, or more than 30, I don't know. There's a lot of temples. That prophecy is fulfilled. And the center stake of Zion, where the fullness and the endowment in its fullness, and I know it's changing and all that, but let's just realize that blessing. And where does the word of the Lord come from? Downtown Salt Lake City. That's where the headquarters of the church. That's where the brethren are. That's where they have their offices. That's where they contemplate and pray and receive revelation. Now, this is a type. We've talked about this before, but if you take the geography of Jerusalem, Old World Jerusalem, and you look at Israel as a whole, so you have up here, you have the Sea of Galilee. You have this nice, beautiful river called the River Jordan, and it flows into a salt water, the saltiest of salt, the lowest point on earth, the Dead Sea. And then up here in the mountains, so you have the Sea of Galilee going down, the River Jordan, and you have the Dead Sea. And then over here in the mountains, you have Jerusalem. Now, if you flip that and mirror it, you have the Great Salt Lake. Down here, you have Utah Lake, you have the Jordan River that connects, and then you have the city of Salt Lake right here. It's like, okay, folks, I'll show you that this is the New Jerusalem by just the geography, and then maybe you'll get it. I can see God doing that. And we just go, no, we got to go back to Jackson County. I don't believe it. So now let's focus on the temple. Now that we've kind of established that, or I feel like I have, and through Scripture, let's go to the Temple Mount. Now, we have to go back all the way to Genesis, okay? And it'll take me just a second to find this. Just a few seconds here. But it's Genesis chapter 22. Abraham commanded to sacrifice Isaac. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt or try, it's a trial, Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. Now this is interesting because if you read the whole, sometimes he says, here I am, and sometimes he says, here am I. Just think about that. I think it's interesting. Anyway, and he said, take now thy son, thine only son, and you could just the image of Christ going to the cross and this situation is, and the premortal life of Christ, here am I, send me. you know, and Abraham going, here I am. It's crazy. It's just amazing. Even though it's really Isaac that is the Christ in this, but just as the Father and the Son are one, Abraham and the Son are one in this sense too. And so they kind of take dual roles in this. And he said, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah. Now this is really good. And offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Okay? So this is it. This is where we first begin to see where Mount Moriah is and what it is. And then on the third day, that's interesting, the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw a place afar off. He saw Mount Moriah. And I think they were leaving from Hebron, which is, a few days' journey, right, to get there. It's probably 30, 40 miles maybe from Jerusalem. I'm not quite sure. I've tried to get there 3 different times, and it's been shut down because of unrest. And someday I'll get there, but to Hebron. Isaac carried his own wood for the sacrifice, just like Christ carried his own wood, his cross. We know the story, but then it goes. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And this is on Mount Moriah. Now, then what we'll do is we'll go to we'll go to. It gets kind of confusing because we have it in Samuel, we have it in Chronicles, and we have it in Kings. So let me find it here real quick. But and I apologize. It just takes me a minute to find it here. So if we go to 2 Samuel, we can read this. And again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah. Now, this is interesting because David numbers his soldiers, and he's doing it to show how mighty he was. And the Lord goes, I'm the mighty one, and I'm going to curse you for trusting in your army versus trusting in me. And so David has to do some serious repenting, right? And what he does, this is 2 Samuel 24. So the Lord sent pestilence upon Israel, and all this happened. And when the angel stretched out his hand upon Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord repented him of the evil and said to the angel that destroyed the people, it is enough, stay now thy hand. And the angel of the Lord was by the threshing place of Araunah the Jebusite, or Ornan is another name that they used. And David built there an altar unto the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. So the Lord was entreated for the land, and the plague was stayed from Israel. And David, so now let's go to 2 Chronicles because we get a little bit better story on this. But I just wanted to read that part. So if we go to First Chronicles, actually, but we also have to go to 2 Chronicles. But we'll go to First Chronicles towards the end. And here we go. Okay, so this is 2 Chronicles chapter 21. Then the angel of the Lord commanded Gad to say to David that David should go up and set up an altar unto the Lord in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And David went up at the saying of Gad, which he spake in the name of the Lord. And Ornan turned back and saw the angel and his 4 sons with him, and hid themselves. Now Ornan was threshing wheat. And as David came to Ornan, Ornan looked and saw David and went out of the threshing floor and bowed himself to David with the face of the ground. What Ornan ends up doing is saying, David, you can have this place. And David goes, no, this isn't a place that I can just have. I need to purchase it. So David purchases the threshing floor. So therefore they own it. And the children, the subsequent ancestors of David, the Jews, own the Temple Mount. This is very key. And David built there an altar and unto the Lord, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings that called upon the Lord. And he sware him from heaven by fire and the altar of burnt offerings. Then David said, this is the house of the Lord, and this is the altar of the burnt offerings for Israel. So it actually became the house of the Lord before any structure was built there. This was on Mount Moriah, the same mount where Abraham was to offer Isaac. It's just so cool. Now, we're going to continue to read about this because Solomon finishes the temple, because David was a warrior, a man of blood, and he did a lot of stupid things, and so evil things that he needed to repent of, and he wasn't allowed to build the temple. But his son Solomon, who came from that relationship with Bathsheba, was allowed to build the temple. Okay, now this is something that we really need to focus on, because it gives us some evidence of the Ark of the Covenant and the city of David and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we're going to let's see if I can find it here real quick. I'm sorry. I think it's in First Kings. So if we go to First Kings, Samuel and Kings and Chronicles, you get so much of the same story, but you kind of have to read. You have to read all of them to get it. Okay, so so I'm in 1 Kings chapter 8. Then Solomon, the first verse. So 1 Kings chapter 8, first verse. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes of the chiefs of the fathers and the children of Israel unto King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. So a lot of the people that think that city of David is where the temple was, it's because the ark was there for a period of time. And we'll talk about some other reasons why they think the ark or the city, the temple was in the city of David. But here it is. So the temple's built. So they bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. And all the men of Israel assembled themselves unto King Solomon at the feast in the month of Etham, and it was the 11th month, or the 7th month. And all the elders of Israel came, and the priests took up the ark, and they brought up the ark of the Lord, and the tabernacles of the congregation, and all the holy vessels that were in the tabernacle, even those did the priests and the Levites bring up. And King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel that were assembled unto him were with him before the ark, sacrificing sheep and goats. So they brought it up to the temple, okay? And they took it out of the city of David. If the temple's already in the city of David, they're not going to take the ark out. Now, you have the Gihon Spring in the Kidron Valley. The Gihon Spring is close to the city of David, kind of at the bottom end of the city of David. And so for the rituals that take place in the temple and the cleansing and then all the subsequent stuff. One of the arguments is that they had to have a water source to do all this, which is true. And it couldn't happen on the Temple Mount because there's no water source there. And so the temple had to be in the city of David, where they had access to the Gihon Spring. Now I've been in the wet part of the Hezekiah's tunnel, going through a few times. I've been to the dry tunnel. I've been where this Gihon Spring is accessed, and this was built. Hezekiah's tunnel, they call this was built. Around probably 700, I think. I think I could be right. BC, and it doesn't really have to do with a lot of this, but the city of David is above the Gihon Spring. So if the temple was up there, they would still have to get water up to the temple. Now, the Temple Mount is even higher. Mount Moriah is higher, and it's north of the city of David. Not that far, but it's far enough. So how did they get water to the Temple Mount? It would probably be, so the city of David doesn't work with the Gihon Spring either, because you'd have to bring the water up. But the Temple Mount, fairly recent, more and more discoveries, but the Temple Mount had cauldrons, had cisterns of water. Well, they go, oh, but that's not fresh water. That's not fresh water. Well, they also had access to what they call Solomon's pools, which are close to the city of Bethlehem, which is higher than the Mount Moriah. Okay, they have discovered an aqueduct traveling probably 5-ish miles, something like that, from these pools, freshwater pools, and this aqueduct traveling all the way to the Temple Mount. In fact, you can see they've excavated. It's right by the Joppa Gate, and there's a road, and then like an overpass, and then an underpass, and in there, anywhere you do construction in Jerusalem, it usually has to be stopped, and then the antiquity department comes in, and then the archaeologists and all that, and they stuff. Well, they found another section of the aqueduct right there, very close to the Western Wall, very close to that area, the Joppa Gate. It's where it's the happening gate, right? So these different gates, usually, I had the Damascus Gate, the Joppa Gate. It's the gate that where you traveled from. So if you traveled from Joppa, the closest route would be to go into Jerusalem, into the city, would be the Joppa Gate. But that's where all the shops and everything are. It's a Jewish quarter, really close to the Armenian quarter, but it's right there. Anyway, they discovered a big chunk of that aqueduct there, but they've found sections of it all the way to Solomon's Pool. So they had that access of fresh water right to the Temple Mount. Now, on the south side of the Temple Mount, there are the southern stairs that led right up to one of the gates of Jerusalem. Christ went up through that gate. You can walk on the steps that Christ had walked on. Now, it's an archaeological site right now. They're continuing to dig. Dozens and dozens of mikvahs, ritual cleansing baths. They've also discovered the pilgrimage road as they were building a parking lot and stuff close to the city of David. They noticed the stairway, and they excavated the stairway, and it leads right to the Temple Mount. They found temple coins. Remember the money changers? You had to have a particular coin to contribute, so you would trade for that coin. And the money changers were getting rich off this because they required more and more and more and more to get your coin to go up and worship. And it could be animals and doves and sheep, whatever. So we have this these continual studies or findings, archaeological digs. So these pilgrimage steps. Then they would have ritual baths, mikvahs. You have the pools of Siloam, which is where the Gihon spring comes through Hezekiah's tunnel, and right there are the pools. They've now excavated a lot of that. Miraculous that the land was donated and that, and this is currently going on now, where the pools were huge, where the cleansing could take place, and then they continue right on up to the temple. Now, the cisterns, huge underneath the Temple Mount, which can't be excavated because the Palestinian, well, it's actually the Jordanian government controls the Temple Mount. 1967, I don't know why it happened, but just to make peace, even though Israel conquered that, they allowed the Jordanian government to police the Temple Mount, which really complicates it. And they're Arab nation, Muslim, and anyway, they won't allow any excavation. They've done some illegal ones themselves and just dumped. Oh, it's horrible. They don't think, they teach that Jews never even lived in Israel. That's how crazy this is. Anyway, they have found through some ways that there are these huge cisterns. Now, when you are offering hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of animal sacrifice, there's a lot of cleaning. You did not need living water for that. And so you would have these cisterns. Now, many people drank the water that was gathered through rain and all these things through these cisterns. They're all through the city. You can go on the Via Dolorosa, and there's a little the nuns run it. It's kind of crazy. You got to get a book because most guides won't take you there, but you can actually go down 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 feet maybe, I don't know, down underneath the city of Jerusalem to where you were at the level at the time of Christ. You can see the Roman games carved in the stones and stuff. And you can see these massive cisterns that held water. Yeah. Water was not an issue. The other thing they'll talk about is the platform and the Antonio Fortress. Fortress. And they talk about, these are the people that make the proposition that the city of David has to be it, because the Temple Mount and the city of David, the Temple Mount and the Antonio Fortress could not have held a legion of Roman. The Temple Mount was for the legion of Roman soldiers, and that the Antonio Fortress, which would be in the north side of the Temple Mount, could not have held a legion of soldiers. This is a ridiculous argument, ridiculous. First off, the legion of Roman soldiers didn't come until around 70 AD, or maybe 60 something AD, well after the crucifixion of Christ. And during the time when they destroyed the temple, that's when the legion came. So they didn't need the Temple Mount for a legion of, and to say that the Romans built that, you can see the Herodian stones. Archaeologists go, no, this was built. You can see the the Ottoman time and the upper stones that are newer, but the base stones of the base Temple Mount and the expanded version of that Herod did, you can see that those are stones from the Herodian time period. It's simple, it's easy. So the legion came later, so that's not an argument. Water is not an argument. Any credible archaeologist says, yeah, from everything we've studied, everything we learned, the Temple Mount is the Temple Mount. This is where the temple was. Now, there is a slight, there's an interesting theory, I think, that could place the temple, and I've talked about this before, right next to the Dome of the Rock. And here is one valid argument that those that propose the city of David is they say that they do agree that the temple site was purchased by David from Ornan the Jebusite, and that it was a threshing floor. But threshing floors have to be smooth, and where the Dome of the Rock is built, the exposed rock there is jagged and rugged. It's bedrock. I've seen pictures of it. My son and I tried to go in to the shrine. I don't know what we were thinking. He kind of looks like he could be, from any part of the world and kind of Middle East. Bald head, beard, kind of olive skin, It's like, hey, and I just follow him, and we go walking in, and it's like, It's like, okay. I wanted to see the rock inside, but I bought some photos and have photos of that rock, and it is jagged. There's a kind of a square that looks like it could be, or not a square, but a rectangle. It looks like it, could have been where the Ark of the Covenant was, and that's a very valid thing. But a threshing floor would be smooth in the sense that this is where you put your grain, your wheat, and you roll things over it and have the animals walking on it, and they break away the chaff from the kernel, and then it's usually on a ridge line where the wind would blow the chaff away and leave the kernels, right? The stuff you consume. And so this is where you get the separation of the wheat and the chaff and all that kind of stuff. So you're looking for smooth. Well, there's some bedrock that's smooth that's just north of the Dome of the Rock. And it lines up exactly with the Eastern Golden Gate where Christ is supposed to come through. So I kind of like that theory in a sense. It makes sense to me. But in any event, it's on the Temple Mount. It's on the Temple Mount. But I would say that the Dome of the Rock would probably be the more likely one, just because that is where Muslims wanted to take away the sight of the Jews. And this is way, way after, I think the Dome of the Rock was built around 600 AD, so this is way after anything, happened with Herod, with Solomon, everything that's all been venerated and put. And so if they wanted to desecrate or claim the holiest site of the Jews, that's probably a good indication of where it was. But it's all on the Temple Mount, and you can see where Herod expanded it. You can measure it. You can see it. You can see where Solomon's Temple Mount was. You can see the slight change in the whole Temple Mount. I've seen it. I've had archaeologists explain it to me right on the site. And you go, yeah. You can see the different stones. You can go on the eastern wall, which we did, where just a huge Muslim cemetery right on the eastern, on the Kidron Valley, right on the eastern side of the Temple Mount wall. And they built their cemetery there because that'll keep Christ from coming into the temple, because there's dead bodies there. We actually got harassed by some Muslim Palestinian teenagers harassing us as we went there, because we were looking at the Temple Mount wall and saw the seam where Herod had added on to it. The evidence is overwhelming. Purchased by David from Ornan the Jebusite on Mount Moriah, the same mount where Abraham went. This is where the dispute will be. This is what will cause the Battle of Armageddon. This is what will cause the Ezekiel 38 and 39 wars. This is what will lead up to Christ's second coming, in the grandeur of the second coming. So it's all about the temple. Now we can look at all the similarities, but this is concerning Judah and Jerusalem. That's the first meaning. This is why we should be looking at what's going on. Now, the Temple Institute, you can Google that and research that. I listen to their YouTube channel, not every week, but close. I love the reading. I love the talk, the temple talk. They are a group of Jews who are preparing to build the third temple, is what we'd call. Now, the third temple is a little confusing because you have Solomon's temple, boom. And then it got destroyed, it got, but not totally, right? It was in ruin. But this is where you have King Cyrus of Persia, who had conquered King Nebuchadnezzar. He had conquered the Babylonians. He's Persia. This is modern day Iran, of all places. And he said, you know what? You Jews can go back. Now I'm liberating you. You were first taken captive from Babylon, and now I've taken you captive, but you can go back. Daniel decided to stay, right? But many of them returned back. We have that recorded in Scripture. You can read it, Ezra, but King Cyrus actually kind of financed, right, and helped Judah and Jerusalem rebuild, and now they couldn't restore it back to what Solomon had, but they restored it, and they read the law, and they were blessed, right? Well, that's a continuation, if you will, of Solomon's temple, but that could almost be a second temple in a sense, because they restored it. But then you get to Herod, and you have that temple. You have that temple that was restored by the encouragement and contribution of King Cyrus of Persia. So Herod wanted to expand the Temple Mount, make it great and glorious. But he didn't want to offend the Jews. He's part Jewish. So he allowed the temple to stay intact because the Jews didn't trust him. And then he built over it, expanded the Temple Mount, and he made it, pretty amazing. And then Christ comes into the scene and begins his ministry, and that's the temple we have at Christ's time. And then Christ prophesies in Matthew 24 that there's not one stone left of that temple. It's going to be gone. And everyone's like, no way. Yeah. Around 70 AD, 38, 40 years after Christ, has died, been crucified, and then resurrected, the Romans just lay siege, and they push it. And you can actually see the stones that were pushed off the Temple Mount, and where that was excavated in the last 20, 30 years, because it was just dirt and mound. They excavate, and then they see that this is stone, and it crushed the streets. That would be on the south west side of the Temple Mount, and It's an archaeological park. You can go in there and you can see it. There's a stone there in Hebrew that you can actually read if you knew Hebrew that dates from the time of Christ, just after, but it's where the shofar horn would be, where the person, the trumpeter, would signal. It's just right there. You can see a replica. They have the actual stone in the museum, but the replica, this is perfect. You can see it. So we know that's where the temple was in so many different ways. We have the pilgrimage steps leading up. We have the temple coins being found there. They're not going to be up on the Temple Mount and the road leading to the Temple Mount if it was in the city of David. Too much evidence, overwhelming evidence. It's the Temple Mount. So I think that's there's so many other scriptures, but we just don't want to get too carried away. But I've covered a lot of things in this video. It's gone long, but I hope that's helpful in how we look at things in modern day, and how we liken the New Jerusalem to the Old Jerusalem, both in geography and in likeness. So we have all these people coming to the Salt Lake Temple. Sounds like we're going to get the Olympics again in Salt Lake. I was thinking, gosh, it might be right around the millennial reign, and the Earth's going to be melted. There might not be enough snow to do the Winter Olympics in, is it 2034? So I kind of had a kick out of that. Do you think there would be an Olympic event during the millennial reign? Could be, I don't know. But God can make it snow regardless if he wants to. But Salt Lake's funny that way. We'll see. The first Olympics, it was indicated by President Hinckley that this is fulfilled. The people are coming here, and a lot of them go to Temple Square and see the mountain of the Lord's house. But just remember, that's in likeness to the one in Jerusalem, because the one in Jerusalem is where the people will come. The one in Jerusalem is where the Lord will, the Messiah, that's where he will rule and be King of Kings and Lord of Lords in Jerusalem. Okay? President Nelson has even indicated that and said that. So Jerusalem is the first meaning of all these scriptures, all these this understanding, and then the New Jerusalem in the Americas, the center stake is Salt Lake. It's going to be that way. We've been told that the Salt Lake Temple is going to be rebuilt and fortified to survive in through the millennium, right? Why? If we're all just going to go back to Jackson County, or that's where the New Jerusalem is. I think I understand, I've read all the scriptures about New Jerusalem. I was taught that Jackson County, but I think the reason why that's appealing is that we don't have to be responsible until that happens, to be watching and looking, because if that's what we're waiting for, and there's no announcement, there's no indication, there's nothing, you know what, then I can just keep cruising. Sorry, it doesn't work that way for me. All that's been fulfilled. All that's been fulfilled. We're blessed. We're such a blessed people. Trying times. Been asked about the time of tribulation. I'm not much focused on the 7 years, the 3.5 and 3.5. I'm just not that focused on that. We have virtually no modern revelation concerning 7 years of tribulation. We read about it in Daniel, but 7 is a complete number, the number of perfection and all that. It could be all kinds of things. But are we in tribulation? Absolutely, in my opinion, yes. We are in it. We are in it. And we are in the trying times of men's hearts failing them and all kinds of things. Now, we can either dwell on all the negative or realize that these are things that will lead up to the coming of the Son of Man, the coming of the Messiah. And that's what, to me, is exciting. And learning how to deal with these challenges, learning how to deal with the corruption and the Gadianton and the conspiring minds of men, recognizing them, knowing that you have to deal with it, just like the Jews had to deal with the Romans, just like the Jewish people had to deal with the corrupt Caiaphas and the corrupt priests of the temple. You can't ignore it. You have to deal with it. And those New Testament times are so critical to study because they were able to see the bigger picture. Those that worship the Lord, worship God through his Son, Jesus Christ, were able to deal with the trials and still praise God. And that's what we need to do. We need to deal with trials and still praise God. I hope this has been a blessing. You guys are awesome. I love each and every one of you. I truly do. And I hope that we can work together in serving each other and in looking forward, watching for these sacred events that take place and tie them back to the ancient scriptures that we are so blessed to have. God bless. Have a great day. Bye-bye.